In the end, the painting was the only thing they couldn't decide on. It was a beautiful seascape, stunning in blues and greys. They'd bought it on honeymoon in Cornwall after seeing it hanging in a little cafe. The price hadn't been unreasonable, but it had still cost most of their spending money and left them eating beans on toast for the rest of the week. They didn't care. Who needed fine dining when you could share something so beautiful instead? That had been a long time ago, and they weren't penniless newlyweds anymore, but instead a successful couple with a beautiful home. The days of beans on toast were long gone, but sadly, so were those days when love seemed to come so easily. Now they had split their assets easily, if somewhat painfully, and now the painting was all that remained to decide upon. Until now, the lawyers had had very little to do. They had overseen the distribution of assets and prepared, or rather had their assistants prepare, the necessary paperwork. It was a straightforward case, the bread and butter of their profession. But now that damned painting was throwing a spanner in the works. An afternoon meeting had been arranged to finalise matters and, they hoped, given that it was a Friday, they'd be able to finish for the weekend, with this case all but behind them. Ahem. One of the solicitors cleared his throat. I think that's about everything, except for the painting. There was a sudden shuffling of papers around the table, the professional equivalent of a collective groan. The first solicitor, Mr. Ladbroke, continued. An original Paul Masters, purchased in Cornwall for £300, now valued at... David Thomas raised his fingers from the table, gesturing for Ladbroke to stop. The value isn't the issue. He cast a look to his soon-to-be ex-wife. It's priceless, Emma Thomas completed, a sad smile on her face. There was silence for a moment, then various suggestions were put forward. Independent appraisal, appropriate financial settlement, shared ownership. David steepled his fingers and sighed. Emma doodled on the headed paper in front of her. Eventually, silence descended again. So, we're really no further on, David said. We either accept joint custody or flip a coin. You could buy the other one. They all turned as one towards the end of the table, where Linda, the clerk, was taking notes. Linda, perhaps it would be better if... David cut Ladbroke off with a curt wave. Go on. There was an article in the paper this morning. I recognised the name Masters from from your case. It caught my eye, so I tore it out to read at lunch. Linda rummaged in the folder in front of her and then produced a scrap of newspaper. Masters only did 2 seascapes before his hand was crushed. Prior to that, he'd done loads of landscapes and country scenes. But his seascapes were the real masterpieces. Get on with it, Ladbroke muttered. David shot him an icy glare and then turned back to Linda. Go on. Linda blushed. I'm sorry, I always get carried away. Of course, you'd know all this already. Emma smiled. No, please, go on. Linda paused, but then smiled. Well, Masters didn't make too much originally. He sold a couple of his paintings in a small local gallery and displayed others in local cafes for sale. That's where we bought ours, Emma chipped in. David nodded, repressing the instinctive smile that threatened to break out in response to Emma's always contagious enthusiasm. But you didn't get all that from that tiny clipping, he asked. Linda blushed again. Well, no, I was quite intrigued when I realised it was about the seascapes. I did some reading. She looked at Ladbroke. During my lunch hour, I mean. I'm sure Mr. Ladbroke will see you're compensated for your time. David shot Ladbroke a warning look. Oh, I don't